The cork pops like a gunshot, a sudden, sharp sound that echoes in the otherwise cheerful room. Laughter dies down for a second, then swells again. I'm holding 2 glasses of champagne, one for Sarah, who's telling a hilarious story about her disastrous attempt at online dating. The bubbles tickle my nose, a fleeting, effervescent joy. This is it, Friday night, my living room filled with the easy hum of friendship. The familiar scent of the candles I always light for guests, a mix of vanilla and something clean, hangs in the air. The cushions on the sofa are plump and inviting. Everything feels right, comfortable, exactly as it should be. My husband stands near the fireplace, glass in hand, watching us. A small, almost imperceptible smile plays on his lips. He catches my eye and raises his glass slightly. I smile back, warmth spreading through me. This is my life. These are my people. The women I've known for years, through thick and thin, work woes and heartbreaks and triumphs. They are family, chosen and cherished. And he is my husband, my rock, the quiet anchor in my sometimes stormy world. It feels like a perfect snapshot of contentment, framed by candlelight and laughter. He clears his throat, not loudly, but enough to draw attention. Sarah's story trails off. All eyes turn to him. He has that look he gets sometimes, serious and focused, the one he wears when he's about to announce something important, something that requires everyone's full attention. Usually it's about a work project, a promotion, maybe a big decision about a holiday. We wait, expecting something good, something shared. His smile is gone now, replaced by that serious line across his mouth. He takes a slow sip of champagne. The silence in the room stretches, suddenly feeling less comfortable and more expectant. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me more than you know. Before that night, my life was a steady rhythm. Predictable, comforting, built on a foundation of shared history and quiet understanding. We had our routines. Mornings started with coffee together in the kitchen, the sun slanting through the window onto the worn wooden table. We talk about the day ahead, or not talk at all, just existing side by side in a comfortable silence that spoke louder than words. Evenings were often quiet too. Cooking together, watching a show, reading in companionable silence. Weekends were for walks in the park, sometimes dinner with friends, sometimes just staying in recharging. It wasn't a life of grand gestures or dramatic peaks. It was a life of small, consistent moments, woven together into a tapestry of quiet love. We built our home together, piece by piece, argument by argument over paint colors, compromise by compromise over furniture. Each item in the house held a memory. The armchair he loved to read in, the painting we bought on our first anniversary, the mismatched mugs that somehow felt perfectly right. It was ours. It felt solid.
Permanent.
I wasn't a naive woman. I knew marriage took work. There were disagreements, frustrating habits, days when we got on each other's nerves. But we always came back to that core of understanding, that deep-seated affection. We talked things through, or so I thought. We made plans. Future plans. Plans about holidays we'd take, how we'd renovate the kitchen next year, what we'd do when we retired. There was never a hint, not a single shadow, that suggested his path was diverging from mine. His presence in my life felt as natural and necessary as breathing. He was my partner, my best friend, the man I had built my entire adult world around. I felt secure, deeply, profoundly secure in the life we had created. My desires were simple: to continue building this life, to grow old together, to keep fostering the connections with the people we loved, like the women gathered in my living room that night. That was my normal, and I cherished it, every quiet, ordinary moment of it. I desired more of the same, just deepening, growing, becoming richer with time. I wanted our quiet evenings, our shared laughter, our inside jokes, our future plans to unfold just as we imagined them. That was my ambition, my dream, my reality. The air in the room seemed to thicken. His serious expression didn't lift. He didn't make a joke, didn't announce good news. Instead, His gaze swept over the faces of my friends, then landed on me. His eyes were blank. That's the only way I can describe it. Empty of the warmth, the familiarity, the love I was used to seeing there. It was like looking at a stranger's face, superimposed onto the man I had known for 15 years. He cleared his throat again. "There's something I need to tell everyone," he said. His voice was steady, too steady. Calm, almost conversational, as if he was announcing the time or the weather, not breaking a life into pieces. My friends shifted, exchanging curious glances. Sarah offered a little encouraging smile. I felt a knot tightening in my stomach. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. This wasn't how he announced good news. This wasn't how he talked about anything important. "I've made a decision," he continued, his eyes still on me, but looking through me, not at me. "And I wanted you all to hear it from me, rather than secondhand." He paused. The silence returned, heavy and suffocating. The laughter of moments ago felt like a distant echo from another lifetime. My heart started to pound, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs. What was happening? What decision? He took another breath. My friends were looking between him and me now, their smiles fading, replaced by confusion, then concern. "I've decided to end my marriage," he said. The words were flat, devoid of emotion. He might as well have been reading them from a script. "I've decided to divorce Anna." The sound of the words hit me like a physical blow. Divorce. My name, linked with that word, by his mouth, in front of my friends. It didn't make sense. It wasn't real. My mind couldn't process it. The glasses of champagne I was holding felt heavy, suddenly threatening to slip through my numb fingers. The bubbles weren't tickling anymore. They were burning. He didn't look away from me. He didn't soften the blow, didn't add any words of regret or pain. Just the cold, hard statement of fact. "It's over." My friends gasped. A collective intake of breath that sounded like a sudden, harsh wind. Their faces, a moment ago filled with light and laughter, contorted in shock, disbelief, pity. It was like watching a slow-motion movie of their expressions changing, reflecting the horror I was feeling but couldn't yet show. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. My world, so solid just moments before, fractured and splintered around me. The sound of the cork popping returned, no longer a symbol of celebration, but of rupture. Everything felt wrong. The air was too cold, the light too harsh, the faces around me too stunned. He just stood there, his expression unchanging like a statue. A cruel, indifferent statue in the center of my ruined living room. He dropped the bomb and stood back to watch the fallout, detached and calm. That calmness was the most terrifying thing of all. It spoke of deliberation, of a decision made far away from me, far away from our shared life. He hadn't just ended our marriage, he had annihilated my sense of reality. And he had chosen to do it here, now, in this way. Why? Why like this? The question screamed in my head, but no sound came out. Just a hollow, echoing silence where my voice should have been. The shock was a physical thing. It wrapped around me, suffocating, paralyzing. My fingers, still loosely holding the champagne glasses, started to tremble. One of the glasses clinked against the other, a tiny, fragile sound in the vast, gaping silence that followed his words. I couldn't look at my friends. Their stunned faces felt like 1,000 eyes dissecting my sudden, public humiliation. My husband stood there, watching me, his expression still unreadable, almost expectant, as if waiting for my reaction. When I finally managed to speak, my voice was a thin, reedy whisper I barely recognized as my own. "What? What are you talking about?" The words felt clumsy, inadequate, utterly failing to convey the earthquake that was tearing through me. He sighed a small, impatient sound. "Anna, I thought I was clear. I want a divorce." "But why?" My voice gained a fraction of strength, rising into a bewildered plea. "Why now? Why?" In front of everyone. His jaw tightened. He shifted his weight, looking slightly annoyed, as if my confusion was an inconvenience. It just seemed like the easiest way to get it done, he said. Easiest? To shatter my world and humiliate me publicly? The sheer, breathtaking cruelty of it stole my breath again. My friend started to stir. Sarah took a step towards me, her hand outstretched. "Anna, are you okay?" she whispered, her voice thick with concern. Okay? I felt like I had been hit by a truck. Okay didn't even exist in the realm of what I was feeling. Another friend, Maria, spoke, her voice directed at him, sharp with disbelief. "How can you do this? How can you say this here?" He ignored her, his gaze fixed on me again. "I'll stay somewhere else tonight," he said, as if we were discussing a minor scheduling conflict. "We can talk properly tomorrow." Talk properly? After this? What was there left to talk about? He had spoken the final words, delivered the verdict. He had already left. Not just the room, but the marriage, the life, everything. The man standing there was a stranger, cold and clinical. He turned and walked towards the door. Just like that. He didn't look back. He didn't offer a word of comfort, explanation, or regret. He just left me standing there, in my living room, in front of my friends, holding 2 glasses of champagne, a monument to a life that had ceased to exist the moment he opened his mouth. My friends rushed to me then. The glasses finally slipped from my fingers, hitting the rug with a soft thud, the sound absorbed by the thick pile. Champagne pooled on the floor, a shimmering puddle that looked like tears. Sarah wrapped her arms around me. I collapsed against her, shaking. The dam broke. Tears I didn't even realize I was holding back streamed down my face. It wasn't just the shock, the betrayal. It was the sheer, raw, public humiliation. He hadn't just left me. He had tried to dismantle me in front of the people I cared about most. The rest of that night was a blur of comforting words, gentle hands, and the bitter taste of betrayal. My friends stayed with me, helping me process, rage, weep. They saw the real him that night, the coldness beneath the familiar surface. But even their support couldn't fill the cavern that had opened inside me. My home, just moments ago a sanctuary, felt tainted, hollowed out. Every object, every corner, whispered of the life that was gone, the man who had vanished into the night, leaving only ruin behind. The silence after they left was deafening. I walked through the house, touching the things we had chosen together, each touch a fresh stab of pain. The feeling of being utterly alone was overwhelming. Alone in a house full of ghosts of a future that would never arrive. The quiet ticking of the clock on the mantelpiece sounded like a countdown to a life I didn't know how to live. The air felt thin, hard to breathe. Every shadow seemed to lengthen, to mock me. Sleep was impossible. I sat on the sofa, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the faint champagne stain on the rug, a shimmering reminder of the moment my world shattered. The days that followed were a slow, agonizing descent into a new reality. Everything felt muted, gray. The vibrant colors of my life seemed to have drained away, leaving behind a dull, flat landscape. I moved through the house like a ghost, performing the basic functions of living, showering, dressing, attempting to eat, but none of it felt real. The silence was the worst. The absence of his familiar sounds, his footsteps, his cough, the clink of his coffee mug, was a constant, jarring reminder of what was gone. He didn't call. Not for days. The talk properly tomorrow never came. His silence was another layer of cruelty, another way of emphasizing how little I mattered, how easily I could be discarded. My friends checked in constantly, their worried voices a lifeline in the darkness. But even their kindness couldn't penetrate the thick fog of shock and despair that had settled over me. When he finally initiated contact, it wasn't a phone call. It was an email. Formal, cold, outlining terms, next steps, logistical details. It was written in the language of business, not of a marriage ending. There was no emotion, no acknowledgement of the life we had shared, no apology for the brutal way he had announced his decision. Reading it felt like being punched in the gut again, harder this time. It confirmed that the man I knew was truly gone, replaced by this cold, calculating stranger. I tried to understand. I replayed every moment of our last few months, searching for clues, for signs I might have missed. Had I been blind? Had he been unhappy for a long time? But nothing fit. We had been planning, laughing, living. There were no fights, no distance, no red flags I could identify. The suddenness of his announcement, the public nature of it, the absolute coldness, it didn't make sense in the context of the man I thought he was. It felt like a meticulously planned attack, not the painful conclusion of a shared journey. The legal letters started arriving soon after. Formal envelopes, lawyers' letterheads, language I didn't understand but felt like blows. His lawyer was aggressive, demanding, painting a picture of me that was unrecognizable. They were trying to minimize my share, to push me out with as little as possible. It wasn't just a divorce. It was a battle, and he was coming at me with everything he had. The initial shock gave way to a different kind of pain, a deep, burning sense of injustice and betrayal. He hadn't just ended our marriage. He was trying to erase me, to rewrite our history, to leave me with nothing. The sheer unfairness of it fueled a flicker of something other than despair. Anger. Cold, quiet, simmering anger. How could he do this? How could he be so cruel, so utterly heartless? The world outside my front door felt hostile. Every time I left the house, I felt exposed, vulnerable. Did people know? Had he told anyone else? Was I the subject of gossip, pity? The public announcement had stripped me bare, leaving me feeling raw and defenseless. I started avoiding places we used to go together, places where I might run into him or people who knew us both. My world shrunk, day by day. The future I had envisioned vanished, leaving behind a vast, empty space I didn't know how to fill. The struggle wasn't just legal or financial, it was existential. Who was I, if not half of US? The foundation of my identity had crumbled, and I was left adrift in the ruins. The easy rhythm of my former life was a cruel memory, replaced by the chaotic, unpredictable beat of a crisis I hadn't chosen. Every day was a fight against the inertia of grief and the rising tide of panic. Despair was a heavy cloak, weighted with the fabric of shattered dreams and bitter memories. It felt like I was drowning, pulled under by the relentless tide of legal papers and his chilling silence. His lawyer's letters became more aggressive, more demanding. They questioned my contributions to the marriage, twisted facts, and made financial demands that seemed designed to cripple me. It wasn't just about ending the marriage anymore. It felt like he wanted to punish me, to annihilate me completely. He had locked me out of joint accounts, frozen credit cards. Suddenly, I was facing not just emotional ruin, but financial precariousness. The sheer calculated cruelty of it was breathtaking. He had orchestrated this, planned it, waited for the right moment to strike, leaving me blindsided and vulnerable. Some friends, predictably, started to distance themselves. It happens in divorces, lines get drawn, sides get taken, or people just get uncomfortable with the messiness of it all. Casual acquaintances became awkward, avoiding eye contact. It felt like his narrative, whatever he was telling people, was taking hold. That I was the one being difficult, the one making things messy. The isolation deepened. I felt like I was fighting this battle alone, armed with nothing but my bruised heart and a dwindling bank account. The weight of it all became almost unbearable. There were days I could barely get out of bed. The house, once a symbol of our shared life, felt like a prison. Every object was a reminder of his presence, his betrayal. I wanted to run, to escape, but there was nowhere to go. He had taken the future, the past, and was trying to take the present too. I started to doubt myself. Was it me? Had I been the problem all along? Had I missed something fundamental? His cold conviction in that moment, announcing the divorce, gnawed at me. He seemed so certain, so justified. Maybe I was the one who was crazy, who didn't understand, who was clinging to something that wasn't real. The gaslighting effect of his actions, the dissonance between the man I knew and the man who was systematically dismantling my life, was making me question my own sanity. I remember one particularly dark afternoon. I was sitting on the floor in the living room, surrounded by boxes of documents his lawyer had sent. The air was thick with dust and despair. The silence was absolute, broken only by the sound of my own ragged breathing. It felt like the end, like there was no way out, no path forward. He had won. He had blindsided me, humiliated me, isolated me, and now he was going to take everything. The thought of facing him, facing his smug confidence in court, made me feel physically ill. It felt like my spirit was breaking piece by piece under the relentless pressure. This wasn't just divorce, it was annihilation. And I was losing the will to fight back. All felt truly lost. Rock bottom arrived quietly, not with a bang, but a whimper. I was standing in the kitchen, staring at a half-eaten plate of food I couldn't remember preparing. The afternoon light was fading, casting long, mournful shadows across the room. My reflection in the window was a pale, gaunt stranger with vacant eyes. That's when I saw it. A flash of something in my own reflection. Not despair. Not fear. Something colder. Something harder. It was the memory of that moment in the living room. His words. His eyes. Blank and devoid of feeling. The calculated cruelty of his public announcement. The way he had tried to shatter me in front of the people I loved. It wasn't just about money or property anymore. It was about dignity. It was about reclaiming myself. It was about refusing to let him define me, to erase me. A slow burn started in my gut, different from the knot of anxiety or the ache of grief. This was cold fire. Determination. He thought he could break me? He thought he could discard me and walk away with everything? He thought he had won. A quiet strength I didn't know I possessed began to surface. It wasn't the frantic energy of anger or the desperate plea of sadness. It was a calm, centered resolve. He wanted a fight? I would give him one. But not on his terms. Not in the mud he was trying to drag me through. I wouldn't just defend myself. I would expose him. I thought of the women who had been there that night. Their shock, their concern. He had tried to shame me in front of them, the people who knew me best. That was unforgivable. That was the point of no return. I went back to the boxes of documents. I started looking, really looking, not just at the legal jargon, but for anything, any hint of what he had been doing, who he had become. I pulled out bank statements, credit card bills, emails he had forwarded to his lawyer. It was tedious, soul-crushing work, sifting through the debris of a collapsed life. And then I found it. Tucked away in a folder, among endless spreadsheets and legal letters, was a printed copy of an email exchange. It wasn't addressed to his lawyer. It was addressed to someone else. Someone I didn't know. The tone was familiar, intimate, affectionate. Not the way he talked to me in the end. Not for a long time, maybe. My hands trembled as I read. The dates. The content. The easy familiarity. It wasn't just one email. There were others, buried in the same folder, printed out as if for future reference. Photos attached to some. Pictures of them together. Laughing. Touching. In places he had told me he was on business trips. The air left my lungs in a rush. Not pain this time, but a cold, clear shock of recognition. This wasn't just a marriage that had ended. This was a betrayal. A calculated, long-term, deliberate betrayal. He hadn't just fallen out of love. He had built a whole other life right under my nose, while pretending everything was fine. The public announcement, it wasn't just cruel. It was a cover. A way to control the narrative, to make it look like he was the one initiating a clean break before the truth could come out. My despair vanished, replaced by a white-hot clarity. This was it. This was the reason. This was the weapon I needed. He thought he was so smart, so untouchable. He had no idea I would find this. He had made a critical error. He had left a paper trail. I called my lawyer the next morning. My voice was steady, calm. No more tears, no more pleading. Just cold, hard facts. I found something, I said. Something you need to see. The meeting with my lawyer felt different this time. There was no more uncertainty in my voice, no more hesitation. I placed the folder on the desk. He listened, his expression grave as I explained what I had found. He looked through the emails, the photos. The silence in the room was heavy, but this time it wasn't my silence of grief. It was the quiet focus of two people preparing for battle. "This changes everything," he said finally, looking up at me. His voice was low, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes. Respect, maybe. Or the glint of a strategist who sees a winning move. "He doesn't know I have these," I said, my voice flat. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact and a declaration of intent. This was my secret weapon. His arrogance had blinded him. He thought he was dismantling my life. He had, instead, provided me with the means to dismantle his carefully constructed facade. My lawyer nodded slowly. A small smile, sharp and humorless, touched the corner of his mouth. "We need to handle this strategically," he said. "We don't show our hand until the right moment." The right moment. The words resonated deep within me. I wasn't just fighting for my financial security anymore. I was fighting for my reputation, for my truth, for the right to stand tall after being brought so low. He had chosen to announce his betrayal publicly, in front of my friends. I would choose to reveal his in a way that exposed his deceit to everyone who needed to see it. The fear wasn't gone entirely, but it was overshadowed by a fierce, protective anger. Not just for myself, but for the woman in the emails, the woman he had lied to, just as he had lied to me. Though my focus was on my own fight, a sliver of cold empathy for her situation existed. She was likely just another victim of his elaborate web of lies. The planning began. My lawyer and I worked meticulously, gathering more evidence, building our case. We anticipated his moves, his arguments. I learned to detach myself emotionally, to view the process as a strategic game. Every piece of evidence was a move on the board. Every legal maneuver was a countermove. He thought he was playing chess. He didn't realize I had found his king and was just waiting for the opportune moment to call checkmate. The sense of power shifted. No longer was I the blindsided victim, reeling from a public blow. I was the one with the hidden advantage, the one who knew the truth he was desperately trying to keep hidden. There was a quiet satisfaction in that, a sense of reclaiming control over my own narrative. He had tried to write the ending to our story, but he didn't know I was holding the pen now. The turning point wasn't just finding the emails. It was the moment I decided to use them, not just for legal leverage, but for something far more potent: public vindication. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was preparing to strike back. And I was going to strike hard. The day of the mediation arrived like a dark storm cloud on the horizon. It wasn't court, but it was the last step before it, a final attempt to settle before the full, messy spectacle of a trial. It was being held in a neutral conference room, sterile and impersonal, the kind of place where life-altering decisions are made on uncomfortable chairs under flickering fluorescent lights. My lawyer was beside me, calm and prepared. I felt a nervous flutter in my stomach, but the cold resolve I had cultivated held firm. He arrived with his lawyer, walking in with his usual air of quiet confidence. He glanced at me, a brief, dismissive look, before settling into his seat across the table. He looked well, rested, utterly unfazed. The sight of him, so self-assured, so unaware of the storm I was about to unleash, sent a chill down my spine. The mediator began with pleasantries, explaining the process, urging cooperation. His lawyer presented their position, reiterating the arguments from the letters, painting a picture of an amicable separation complicated by my supposed unreasonableness. He sat there, nodding along, occasionally interjecting with a calm, measured statement designed to make him sound reasonable and me difficult. The same tactics, the same narrative he had been pushing from the start. It was infuriating, but I kept my expression neutral, following my lawyer's earlier advice. Don't show them anything. Let them think they're in control. After they finished, it was our turn. My lawyer started calmly, addressing their points, refuting their claims with facts and figures. He outlined my contributions to the marriage, the joint assets, the equitable distribution I was seeking. He was methodical, professional, laying the groundwork. Then he paused. The atmosphere in the room shifted subtly. My husband looked up, a slight frown creasing his brow. His lawyer leaned forward, a flicker of caution in her eyes. "Mr. Smith, My lawyer began, his voice low and deliberate, addressing my husband directly. There's a matter of full disclosure that needs to be addressed. My husband's frown deepened. What are you talking about? We have reason to believe, my lawyer continued, his gaze steady, that certain financial resources were diverted from marital funds without Mrs. Smith's knowledge or consent. Specifically, funds related to expenses incurred in connection with a separate, non-marital relationship. My husband froze. Absolutely still. The color drained from his face, leaving it ashen. His eyes, which had held that detached confidence moments before, widened almost imperceptibly. He shot a look at his lawyer, who looked just as surprised, her eyes darting between him and my lawyer. What evidence do you have of this? His lawyer interjected, her voice sharp, trying to regain control. My lawyer didn't answer her directly. He turned back to my husband. Mr. Smith, I have here copies of emails. Emails between you and the Ms. name of other woman. Correspondence dating back over 2 years. He paused, letting the weight of the statement sink in. Emails discussing trips you took together, gifts purchased, expenses paid using what appear to be joint funds. Some rather explicit messages detailing the nature and longevity of your relationship. He took a folder from his briefcase. Not the full file, just a thin selection. He slid them across the table towards my husband. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for them. My husband's eyes scanned the documents. His breath hitched. His face was a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. He was completely blindsided. He had been so focused on painting me as the unreasonable one, on controlling the narrative of the divorce as a mutual decision or his choice to leave a stagnant marriage, that he never imagined I would uncover his carefully hidden secret. He thought he had packed away all evidence, buried his tracks. But he hadn't. And the look on his face showed the precise moment he realized the depth of his failure. The man who had stood so tall, so confident just minutes ago, seemed to shrink in his seat. His lawyer snatched the papers, her eyes scanning them quickly. Her face tightened. She looked at him, then at me, then back at the papers, a dawning horror replacing her earlier composure. My lawyer leaned forward slightly. These documents, he said, his voice still calm but carrying immense power, suggest not just infidelity, but a significant pattern of financial deception, potentially impacting the equitable distribution of marital assets. He let that hang in the air. Financial deception. A serious charge. One that would look very bad in court. My husband opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked cornered, trapped. The arrogance was gone, replaced by raw panic. The mask had dropped. He was exposed. Furthermore, my lawyer continued, and here was the sting, the twist designed not just for legal leverage, but for public humiliation, just as he had done to me. We believe this relationship was the actual reason for Mr. Smith unilaterally deciding to end the marriage, a fact he deliberately concealed, choosing instead to make a public announcement designed, we believe, to control the narrative and potentially damage Mrs. Smith's reputation. He looked at me then, truly looked at me, for the first time in months. His eyes were filled with a mixture of fear, hatred, and something else, a flicker of disbelief that I, the woman he had so easily discarded, could have done this. I met his gaze, not with anger or sadness, but with that same cold, hard resolve I had found at my lowest point. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. My silence spoke volumes. His lawyer started talking rapidly, trying to spin, to mitigate, to suggest this was irrelevant, personal. But the air had changed. The power had shifted entirely. My husband sat there, silent, his carefully constructed world imploding around him. He thought he held all the cards, that he could discard me like damaged goods and walk away clean. But he hadn't accounted for the paper trail. He hadn't accounted for my quiet determination. He hadn't accounted for the fact that the victim, pushed far enough, might just turn the tables and burn their attacker's world down around them. And in that moment, seeing his utter devastation, the blindsided shock on his face, I knew I hadn't just survived. I had won. And I had won bigger than he ever could have imagined. The vindication, cold and sharp, was a potent elixir. He had tried to publicly shame me. Now he was publicly exposed. The immediate aftermath of that mediation session was a chaotic blur. My husband's lawyer scrambled, trying to contain the damage. My husband himself was speechless, his face a mask of shock and fury. The mediator, who had started the day so calmly, looked visibly rattled, the sterile conference room now thick with the fallout of raw, exposed truth. There was no settlement that day. My husband, humiliated and cornered, refused to budge on some points, clinging to the last vestiges of his control, while his lawyer was clearly advising damage control. We left the room, leaving them to deal with the wreckage. News travels fast, especially in the circles my friends and I moved in, circles where my husband's dramatic announcement had already become the central topic of stunned whispers. I hadn't explicitly told my friends everything immediately after finding the emails, only that I'd found proof of his deceit and betrayal, and that I was fighting back. I wanted the full reveal to happen at the right time, in the right way. That opportunity came a few weeks later. It was a small gathering, planned by Sarah and Maria, specifically to get me out of the house and into a space where I felt safe and supported. My friends were all there, the same faces who had witnessed his announcement months ago, their eyes still holding a mixture of concern and protectiveness towards me. We were talking, cautiously navigating the subject of the divorce, the difficult legal process. I could see the worry in their eyes, the fear that I might not be okay, that he might grind me down. There was a sense of helplessness among them, wanting to support me, but not knowing how. I took a deep breath. This was the moment. Not in a formal setting, but among the people who had seen his cruelty firsthand. I looked around at their faces, the faces of the women who had held me up when I felt like I was falling apart. "I want to tell you something," I said, my voice quiet but firm. They all turned to me, sensing the shift in my tone. "You were there when he made his announcement." They nodded, their expressions softening with sympathy. "He said he wanted a divorce." I continued, my voice steady, and made it seem like it was some kind of mutual decision, or that he was just done. What he didn't tell you, what he didn't tell me until I found out myself, was why. I paused, letting the suspense build. Their eyes were fixed on me, expectant. "He didn't leave because our marriage was over," I said, my voice gaining strength. "He left because he was having an affair. A long-term affair. He'd been lying to me for years. Taking trips, spending money, building a whole other life." Their reactions were immediate and visceral. Gasps, muttered exclamations of disbelief and anger. "No way," Sarah whispered, her eyes wide. "That bastard." Maria's voice was sharp with outrage. "He kept it as a complete secret," I explained, my voice level, devoid of the raw pain that had consumed me initially, replaced now by a cold, factual tone. "And when he decided to leave, he didn't just tell me privately. He chose that moment in front of you, not out of some misguided sense of honesty, but because he wanted to control the narrative. He wanted to blindside me, to make it look like he was the one making a clean break before the truth about his affair could come out." I saw the dawning realization on their faces, the pieces clicking into place. His coldness, his public announcement, his subsequent actions, it all made sense now, in the context of a man desperately trying to hide a massive betrayal. "He thought he had covered his tracks," I said, a dry, humorless smile touching my lips. "He thought I wouldn't find out. But I did. I found the proof. The emails, the pictures, everything." A wave of murmuring swept through the room. Faces previously etched with pity for me were now contorted with anger towards him. "And at the mediation," I continued, my voice rising slightly, fueled by the energy in the room, "my lawyer laid it all out. The affair. The financial deception. The fact that he didn't just end our marriage, he betrayed it completely and then tried to use his public announcement as a shield." The room fell silent again, but it was a different kind of silence. A tense, expectant silence. They were waiting for the ending. "He sat there," I said, picturing his ashen face in the mediation room, completely blindsided. He had no idea I knew. No idea I had the evidence. He tried to tear me down, humiliate me in front of you. But in the end, he exposed himself. And then it happened. It started with a single clap.
Sarah.
Hard and sharp. Then Maria joined in. And then another friend and another. Soon, the entire room erupted in applause. Loud, strong, rhythmic applause. It wasn't just for me. It felt like applause for truth, for justice, for the turning of the tables. It was applause for the quiet strength they had seen me find, for my refusal to be crushed. It was a collective roar of approval, a powerful affirmation that they believed me, that they supported me, that they saw him for who he really was. Tears welled up in my eyes then, but they weren't tears of sadness or pain. They were tears of overwhelming relief and gratitude. In that moment, surrounded by the sound of their clapping, I didn't feel broken or humiliated. I felt seen, vindicated, strong. He had tried to take everything from me, including my dignity, but he had failed. And in front of the very people he had tried to use as witnesses to my downfall, I was rising. The applause was a physical manifestation of reclaiming my power, my story, my life. It was louder, sweeter, and infinitely more satisfying than any quiet victory could have been. He had announced my divorce to them to hurt me. They applauded my triumph over his deceit. The sound of the applause faded, leaving behind a different kind of silence, one filled with understanding, validation, and a palpable sense of shared victory. My friends came forward, one by one, hugging me, whispering words of support, their eyes reflecting a newfound respect. The air in the room felt lighter, cleaner. The darkness that had enveloped me for months began to recede, pushed back by the warmth of their acceptance and belief. The legal battle continued for a while longer, but the dynamic had fundamentally changed. With the truth of his affair and financial deceit exposed, his position was significantly weakened. His aggressive stance softened, replaced by a reluctant willingness to negotiate. The evidence I had found ensured a more equitable settlement than he had initially fought for. It wasn't easy, it wasn't quick, but eventually the divorce was finalized. It wasn't a celebration, not really, but it was a release. A cutting of the final cord that tied me to him and his lies. Life didn't snap back to normal overnight. There were still moments of pain, flashes of anger, lingering questions. The scars were real, etched deep. But the wound was no longer festering. It was healing. Slowly, imperfectly, but surely. The biggest change wasn't the legal outcome, it was internal. I had faced my deepest fears, abandonment, humiliation, financial ruin, and I had survived. More than survived. I had found a strength I never knew I possessed. I had learned to trust my instincts, to fight for myself, to stand up to cruelty and deceit. My friends were a constant source of support. They didn't just help me through the crisis, they helped me rebuild. We talked, we laughed, we grieved the past and planned the future. Our bond deepened, forged in the fire of shared experience. They had seen me at my lowest, and they had seen me rise. I looked at my home, the place that had felt so tainted after his announcement. It was slowly becoming mine again. I repainted the walls, rearranged the furniture, filled the space with things that reflected who I was now, not just who we had been. It was a gradual process, each change a small act of reclaiming. I thought about him sometimes, not with longing or even intense anger anymore, but with a kind of detached pity. He had chosen a path of deceit and cruelty, and in the end, it had blown up in his face. He had lost not just his marriage, but his reputation, his standing, the respect of the people who mattered. He had thought he was strong, but his strength was built on lies, and lies always crumble eventually. My victory wasn't about destroying him. It was about saving myself, about refusing to let his actions define me or diminish my worth. The future stretches out, not as a pre-planned route, but as an open road. There's uncertainty, yes, but also possibility. I am no longer half of a couple. I am whole, standing on my own 2 feet. I learned that the most dangerous betrayals often come from the people you trust the most, but I also learned that the deepest strength often comes from within, forged in the fires of adversity. The sound of applause still echoes sometimes, a quiet reminder of that night, of the moment I turned the tables, of the power of truth and the unwavering support of true friends. It's a bittersweet sound, tinged with the memory of pain, but ultimately, it's the sound of triumph. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear your version. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. Thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life.